because we were here.
Stand by the microphone.
Sorry, I get real animated and want to be out there dancing around. While Dan's pulling the slideshow up for presentation, I just want to thank the Albuquerque Historic Society for inviting me to do this. I think I did one for a mini conference that you did, hosting the New Mexico Historic Society a while back. And so from that, I think came this edition of the La Cronica that had a lot of information about the history of Albuquerque's public art. And I wanted to build on some of that and kind of touch on some of these artworks that were included in this little edition, but then also tell you about what's going on now. And I've added one more kind of layer to the presentation today, just because on Monday, City Council introduced some legislation to hopefully help the public art program go from 1% for art to 1.5% for art. And so I want to share with you why that's really important. So this slide is not how I feel. The best part about public art is the public, but when public art is out in the public realm, there's a lot of extra love and attention that comes to our public artworks. And we have a phrase in the office when something happens, we'll tell each other, I'll tell the collection manager, oh, Crossroads got too much love today, which means it got tagged or it got bubblegummed or it got run into by a car, whatever might have happened with our public artwork. So what I want to share with you is some stories about how public art gets too much love and sometimes not enough, and then what we have to do to take care of it, but it's all part of our history of Albuquerque. I'm also going to touch a little bit on some new projects that are underway that are going to become part of the historical public art collection 20 years down the road from now. So if you go next. I am Sherri Brueggemann. I'm with the Public Art Urban Enhancement Division with the city's Department of Arts and Culture. We changed our department name about 1.5 years ago, and we're so excited to be part of the department that really just celebrates everything arts and culture in Albuquerque, including Albuquerque Museum, which we're at today. So thank you to the museum for hosting us as well. So next. So as I mentioned, I want to talk about public art all over Albuquerque, or at least in, I try to get it out and about a little bit, but we do have so much public art in the downtown, Old Town core. And Janet mentioned to me that you all do the walking tour, so I also did, a lot of work in from all over the place. So the first two I want to start with are some of those public artworks that we've inherited that were here before public art program and public art funding was here. So the first one, next slide, Dan, is the Madonna of the Trail.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm going to keep you on your toes, Dan.
Okay.
I got 60 or 70 slides, so we're going to be going through this at a pretty quick pace. Obviously, many of you, I'm sure you know about the Madonna of the Trail. She is one of many that are spread throughout the United States. And if you go to the next slide, just a couple weekends ago, I had the opportunity to be in Springerville, Arizona, which is the location to the west where the next Madonna of the Trail is, and was able to take some pictures of it there. They have a little bit of a different configuration of the way that our Madonna is displayed at the northwest corner of the federal courthouse. But each of them have one side dedicated to sort of the women pioneers of that particular state. And I do want to acknowledge that, of course, these things were installed at the height of, westward expansion and colonization, usually at the expense of indigenous lands from indigenous people. And amazingly, though, there's really only one article that's out about, really the controversy of the Madonna of the Trail, because at least while these types of sculptures were going up around the country, and the majority of them were honoring men, men on horses and other types of, westward expansion. This is one of the very few that actually honored women. So it remains, to my knowledge, all of them are still intact and they still remain. So while we might have, controversy about memorials and monuments and certain sculptures in our state, in our city, and of course nationally, the Madonnas of the trail still reside in their original location. Okay, okay, so this is just an example of how one panel of the sculpture is commemorating its locale. Okay, next. Okay, the next one is the Brayden Memorial, which again, this really great newsletter gives a really good thorough description about the Brayden Memorial and its place in downtown Albuquerque in Robinson Park. But one of the things that I thought I would share with you that maybe you don't know is that this sculpture that is actually in the park now is not the original hot metal cast sculpture that was purchased and put in place. About 11 to 12 years ago, we became very concerned about that particular object, the original sculpture that was there, because it was getting frail, it was getting bitter and brittle, and we were concerned that people were going to vandalize it. So with a whole lot of research about copyright and about availability, we decided to take the steps of using the original pot metal cast zinc sculpture, and we had a bronze made from it. So the one that's in the park actually is bronze. It's going to hold up a lot better. So next slide. So where is the other one? In my office, right now. But it's been the safest place to keep her for a while. When we moved from our current offices from the convention center back over to City Hall, we're planning a nice little area to put her on display in the first floor, where we hope to have a first floor gallery. Okay, so next slide. This just shows you that we had the pot metal one painted in sort of faux bronze at one point, and even that paint started chipping, so you can see the actual real metal there. And this is why it's very brittle, and we don't want to, put it out. Okay, and so then we dedicated it. Next slide. We dedicated the bronze piece with many members of the Arts Board and lots of neighborhood folks who helped us celebrate, making sure that that piece is there and continues to celebrate, much older history, not really. Okay, next. So the Southwest Pieta in Martinez Town was actually the very first sculpture that was ever commissioned after the 1% for Art Ordinance went into place in 1978. It actually helped usher in the 1% for Art Ordinance, a group of people that were sort of self-appointed and supported by then Harry Kinney, that called themselves the Arts Board. He nominated them, and they wrote and got a national endowment for the arts grant for $50,000. And they did an open competition, and the winner of that competition was Luis Jimenez for this sculpture that was originally planned to be in Old Town. And so next slide. The artist submitted a drawing of the sculpture as he envisioned it, based off of some of his earlier works where he depicted the sort of Romeo and Juliet version of Mexican lore of the two volcanoes in Mexico, where one volcano represents male, one volcano represents female, and I can't remember which one died first, or didn't die, but they fainted. The other one thought that they were dead, so they killed themselves, and then they were both dead. Anyway, it's a kind of a Romeo and Juliet story. But we ended up with the next slide. After quite a controversy. So Albuquerque's very, very first public art project became very controversial because the folks in Old Town didn't want it here. So the folks in Martinez Town said, we'll take it. And so this is an image of it after restoration. About 7 or 8 years ago. I'm sorry, I'm off with years. That COVID time kind of screwed things up. But anyway, it's been about 7 or 8 years. And this is the Martinez Town community totally refurbished the park, and we were able to refurbish the sculpture as well. So if you go to the next slide, one of the things that we're super excited about with public art is we're able to use a lot of new technology to be able to see our public art in other ways. So this is actually a drone photograph of the entire park. So it gives us an opportunity to show people who might not visit here how the artwork is situated within an entire community. Okay, next slide. So the first sculpture that did actually get built with 1% for art funds, I don't know, does anybody remember this alligator water fountain at the front of the Albuquerque? Well, this was the first piece of public art that got built in Albuquerque because the Pietà was so controversial, it took many years for it to actually get built. So this is by Tom Waldron, and it was a water fountain, and the water kind of comes out of the alligator's mouth. And this is a dark picture because the only picture we have is from a slide. We haven't had it scanned very well, but shortly after, within about 18 months, the zoo decided that it was going to reconfigure the entrance into the front of the zoo. And so the artist was told that he was going to have to move it and have it relocated, and also might need to be a little bit smaller. Well, so the artist was so frustrated that he had just basically got it installed, and then they said, okay, take it away and bring it back a little smaller. So what he brought back was this. He totally cut it up, and he basically brought it back and said, here's your alligator vase. Turn it into a vase instead of a water fountain. So the joke is that this piece has actually traveled throughout different locations. It's been at the Tramway Library, and if you go to the next slide, it now resides in the Albuquerque Convention Center, and it's been resurfaced. So we always take it back to the artist and say, okay, it's kind of become like a standing joke of like, okay, well, we're ready to move your alligator vase again. Would you like to be patina it? And he'll say, sure, yeah, we'll take care of it. So he puts different patina on it often. So this is really beautiful. It's gone from an alligator water fountain to a really very beautiful sort of minimalist shape, and it's in the Albuquerque Convention Center. Okay, next is the infamous Chevy. I have to legally say that I'm not allowed to call it Chevy on a stick. That is a violation of the Visual Artists' Rights Act, which is really important. The Visual Artists' Rights Act protects the integrity of works of art and the artist's reputation for public art in public spaces. And so this work has, many of you in the room probably know that it sort of jokingly became known as Chevy on a Stick. It's primarily from when Larry Aarons was a radio host on KOB, I believe it was KOB, and was not in favor of the public art and the process by which it was selected. So they labeled it Chevy on a Stick.
What is the date on that, Sherri?
The date? I believe it's 1981. 1981. Yeah. So the name of it is Cruising San Mateo. There were two other components: a ceramic tile table and a ceramic tile easy chair. And what a lot of people don't know, if you go to the next slide, is that it is literally a ceramic tiled Chevy that sits on top of the arch. And so this is part of the installation process where they picked the Chevy up and they were moving it over to actually set it on the arch. And then she built all of the tiles to go over it. So you can imagine that it's been a conservation nightmare in some ways because it's an actual car. It's been completely emptied out. There's no engine or anything like that. There's not even any chairs. The frame has been reinforced to help hold it up so it doesn't collapse, but it does rust inside. And it changes. A hot metal car expands and contracts faster than ceramic tile. So about 10 years ago, we did a complete thorough restoration because there's so many people that photograph this. If you go to the next slide, I just love this picture because it makes it look like it's a little tiny toy sculpture, but it's not. It's just the way that the artist photographed it. And if you go to the next slide, it gets used in talking about public art in schoolrooms. This is one of my all-time favorite. We do a lot of work in children's classrooms, and we always get thank you notes. And this was my favorite piece of art that ever came back in a thank you note for talking about public art. Go to the next slide. So this is great because it kind of shows a little bit of interaction of people out there, but it is one of the most photographed pieces in Albuquerque for people who who actually kind of tour around looking for public art. And the next slide, but most importantly, we don't want them to come across problems like this. So we do our best to maintain, these are all handmade tiles. And so we've had some of them remade and replaced, but over time they do, just like any sort of outdoor material, the weather, the environment gets to it. So we're doing our best to conserve that. Okay, next slide. This is the Knob Hill Gateways by Terry Conrad and Joan Weissman. Terry Conrad did the neon and designed the structure, and Joan Weissman did the ceramic tile on the pillars. Neon, we all love neon. We're coming up on our 100th anniversary of the 6. We're trying to reinvigorate neon again, but it can be difficult to take care of. Just because whether it's a bird that flies into it or people, kick things up or throw things at it. But a few years ago, if you go to the next slide, Kim, we had it completely restored, but we worked with the neon artist, Robert Rondazzo, who has absolutely neon in Knob Hill, and jazzed it up a little bit with the artist's approval of not making the neon all one color, but kind of putting some different colors in there. And then the next slide. But time and time again, just, because it's structure outdoors, heavy winds or something, this is actually a piece of neon. Right here, a piece of the neon that blew off on one end, literally hanging by an electrical wire on the other end. And so we have to get that taken care of. But of course, because it goes over Central Avenue, we have to do lane closures. And now with the ART bus, it's kind of complicated to, swap out a piece of neon tubing. So, but we get it done. We get on these things as fast as we can. Okay, next slide. So one of the things that we have to do on occasion is relocate public art. For things happen, changes come along. So some of you may know this sculpture, the Solar Arc by O.K. Harris, which is now in the 4-H Park up on 12th Street. But how many of you remember when it used to be on the corner of Central and University, or Central and Girard? Yes. And it had these big, concrete walls behind it, and I don't remember exactly. I think it might have been George Anselvecchius, the former dean of the School of Architecture, who said that he felt like this was the most constipated corner in all of Albuquerque because there was too much built environment going on competing with the artwork. So fortunately, we were able to move it, next slide, out into a much bigger open area. I'm preparing for the fact that as things move forward with the potential Indian School Memorial in 4-H Park, we may look at moving this again. We don't really know how that's going to go forward or what's going to happen. There's a plaque here about the arch, and it does acknowledge and recognize that the burial grounds for the school are very nearby. And if that turns out to be something that is deserving of a different type of memorial, then we will gladly, move that piece of artwork again. It's really big, but sometimes that's just what has to happen. Okay, next, a major restoration project that we did is the prisms that were in the Albuquerque Convention Center on the west complex. They were in the skylights that recently have been completely redone. As many of you probably know, the Albuquerque Convention Center went under a renovation about 8 years ago, and we took advantage of the opportunity to use some very, very large equipment that they were able to bring in to the building because they literally blew out the doors. Otherwise, we couldn't get equipment like this into the convention center in order to take these prisms down. So next slide. So we took them down, and it took a while for us to get with the artist and to get a new configuration to put them in the clear story windows in the east complex of the convention center, which is only 2 stories high, not 3. And this just gives you an example, a sense of how big those prisms are. So this person's sitting on top of like a 7-foot ladder. It's literally sitting on the ground as they work to get all of the fittings and the hardware, and then pick it up and then resuspend it. So all of these prisms have been moved into the east complex. Next slide. And so they are busy. throwing rainbows all over the big lobby of the East Complex of the Convention Center. So the best time of day to see it is on the summer solstice in the afternoon hours, and it just throws these beautiful rainbows all over the entire part of the convention center. And next slide. So it's really important for us to, protect and take care of these works of art. Charles Ross is a renowned artist. He's part of sort of the original land art artist. And he also has his prisms inside the Dwan Light Sanctuary, which is an incredible building on the United World College campus in Las Vegas, which thank God by miracle, the fire went around it this spring and it still stands. But I kind of watch this, every day to make sure that, just to know whether we were going to lose this incredible building with all of these prisms, because then we would end up with the only set of prisms left in New Mexico. So, okay, so Janet asked me to say a little bit about the Albuquerque Sunport and the Sunport collection. And it's kind of confusing because, well, we've all been kind of confused actually about who actually owns that art and who takes care of it. Well, you, the citizens of Albuquerque, we, the city of Albuquerque, we all own the public art in the Sunport collection. But they have obviously over years and years and years come under so many more restrictions about their space, about security, about what, restrictions about who can go past certain areas. And over that amount of time, we've really just sort of deferred to the Sunport staff about how and where artworks need to go. So the next slide. So these are a couple of the famous Pacelli paintings that were in the old original terminal, thank you, aviation terminal, that have now been relocated. And sometimes these are loaned out like a museum with loan pieces, and they will take them. But we know also that airports are self-funded, they have to generate revenue, and a lot of times really beautiful vertical real estate, that's what I call it, gets sold to advertisers. So we promote our golf courses and our casinos and other destinations for people coming to the airport, and then the artwork gets relegated to some other area. But we maintain a good relationship with the Sunport. We don't manage the artworks, except for if we want to borrow some and put them in City Hall, like we hang some in City Council chambers every now and then. But for the most part, the airport manages all their own public art in their collection. Okay, moving on to other types of fun public art and maintenance. After working for the public art program for 14 years, I finally got to go to the actual, like to the yucca. I've seen it, ever since it was built, but getting, doing the hike up there, it was just something that I hadn't ever really done. We have great people who take care of it, but I decided this time I needed to go up there and see what was going on. And when I went up there, I was so glad I did. It's like to learn that this is how we actually keep the thing lit up. It is totally self-contained, solar panels and a battery bank in order to run what we call sometimes the disco lights of the yucca, so that it stays lit up. And because it is totally self-contained, solar battery life changes over time. Some of them will wear out sooner than the others, and we have to swap them out, and then they all have to be hooked back up again together. And the light fixtures themselves are quite a bit to take care of. But we have some dedicated people who live on the other side of the hill that will call us every time something goes wrong with the yucca. So we're on it. We actually have a solar and a LED lighting company on contract, so we can call them and say, yucca's out. Okay, so we'll go to the next one. Oh, did somebody say, where is it? The yucca is on I-40 going west through to Harris Canyon. It's actually easier to see it. Yeah, it's easier to see when you're coming west through to Harris Canyon. It's on the north side right before you kind of come around the corner and see Albuquerque. Okay, so the Tricentennial Towers, these are, I'm kind of going to share a little bit with you now about like what we're anticipating we're going to need to do to take care of some of the public art. So the Tricentennial Towers are going to be probably up next. It's going to be a massive project. We've been waiting, kind of trying to keep tabs on the highway department of when they're going to be doing some modifications and changes to the intersection. So it looks like that's coming. We're going to try our best to coordinate any of this kind of restoration at the same time as any other construction on I-40 and Rio Grande Boulevard, because we know it's going to be a disruption. And the last thing public art wants to do is disrupt traffic just to take care of our public art. It's also very expensive. But the lighting, it is already like 20 years old, and we're definitely going to need to get that up to date. And the surfaces are going to need to be repainted as well. So it's going to be quite an undertaking, but we're making plans for it. Okay, next.
Here it is.
Okay, so, and of course, people want to know what's going on with the La Jornada and the central figure of Oñate. So do I. Where it sits right now is that the city council is the body that will need to make a decision about how to go forward. In 2020, City Council directed the Department of Arts and Culture to do public feedback and to do some community conversations and get a lot of information. Our department did that. All of that information was presented to the Albuquerque Arts Board, and the Albuquerque Arts Board then did the part that they were supposed to do, which is review and make sure that all the information was accurate about the artwork itself, and sent it back to City Council. You want to go to the next slide? And where it is that the Oñate figure remains in storage. It's completely intact, remains in storage, and when City Council makes a recommendation about what steps to take next, that's what we'll do. We've put together an entire outline, but we're kind of sitting, waiting in limbo like everyone else. So I wish I had more to tell you, but it falls onto our City Council to kind of move forward. But I can tell you, it's not going to be cheap when a decision is made. So if you go to the next slide, this is the bottom side of Oñate's boot. And this is the rebar, the steel that holds it into place. So there's one on each foot. And when Sonny Rivera anchored these into the original installation, those bars went very deep into the ground so that it wouldn't be, available to be stolen. It took quite a bit of effort to take it out. And so at any point we find out or decide a decision is made about where the sculpture is going to go back, we're going to have to do some major retrofitting and thinking about how we're going to make sure that the figure is going to be safe for installation again. It can be done. It's just going to involve a lot of, drilling, welding, all of that kind of stuff to put it back into place. But it has happened. If you go to the next slide, where this is the smaller figure, the little girl that is part of the whole entrada, that somebody did try to steal that figure at one point. But again, to Sonny Rivera's credit, he anchored them so well into the surface that it wasn't able to get out. But we've already kind of had our test run with knowing what the installation mechanism is going to have to look like when we repair this piece.
What year did that?
This is probably
Further back.
This is probably 2010, 2011, maybe. Yeah, so we did a major restoration, but that figure is only this tall. It's much smaller, so it's a little less work. When we look at the larger than life size Oñate figure, that's going to take a lot more work. Okay, going forward. Okay, so now I want to share a little bit about some of the projects that we have in process that are both telling history and defining their own history as public art objects in our collection. Federico Vigil is currently underway with a very large scale fresco in the convention center. It's called the Sky Bridge Frisco, and it is all about the history of wine and agriculture in New Mexico. And it's a 2,500 square foot fresco. It is about 2/3 the size, or about half the size of the Torreon, which is now complete with its very beautiful visitor center on the front of that. If you haven't seen the Torreon fresco, I highly encourage you to go to the National Hispanic Cultural Center and look at that work. Federico continues with this project. It's everything about wine, grape growing, and the history of wine in New Mexico, with some references to very, very early fermentation in Mesopotamia, and some depictions of the Greek gods, Bacchus, and some other fun cosmic stuff too that looks at how the grape growers would pay attention to the stars and the alignment to know when to harvest their grapes. So it's very much a fresco about New Mexico's history. Okay, next. This summer we commissioned a mural for the Martin Luther King roadway in the Martin Luther King Memorial area. As some of you may know, that the Harris Boulevard, before it turns into MLK Avenue, goes under the railroad tracks and the exit ramp from the convention center. And there's kind of all these weird tall, let's go to the next slide, Dan. There's these columns and weird walls. And so we did a mural competition, and Noah Barnett, who's an emerging muralist and aerosol muralist, but also does very, very high realism with his aerosol work, was selected to do this mural. So he brought in a lot of historic figures that inspired Martin Luther King, but also himself. And he took a few quotes and phrases from some Martin Luther King speeches. And so it's a really beautiful mural, really brightened up the space. And there's a lot of interesting things to see as you're driving by. I don't recommend that you look at it completely while you're driving, because it's not tighter, but there's a lot of great stuff that you can. Yeah, absolutely.
Who's the guy on the left?
Oh my gosh, I don't remember.
Like somebody's cut.
Yeah, Frederick Douglass is on the right, and then there's Coretta King is one of the ones in the back. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I'd have to go read his presentation again. Okay, next sculpture.
Oh, that's wow.
Yeah, so this is a public artwork that got installed right at the height of the pandemic in 2020. It's at Fire Station 9, which is
You make it, Madonna.
yes, exactly, right next to the Breaking Bad car wash. But it's a really beautiful fire station, and we're very excited that the fire department has been one of our biggest champions of public art in Albuquerque. They just, every time that they're even talk about a new building, they call us up and say, hey, we're going to do a new fire station. And this time around, they wanted something that wasn't sort of, typical or standard, what you might think of as kind of the, which is not a problem, to honor our first responders, but they wanted something that was a little more dynamic and exciting. So this is a sculpture by John Cannell, and it's all made out of car hoods. So he finds all the car parts, different, car yards, exactly, junkyards, and he gets the best color hoods, and he cuts them up into the right shape, and we built these crazy armatures and then attaches them all. And so this is when the top part was being set down, and then he came back with a couple more pieces to close up those holes. So hopefully you get a chance to see it driving up the knob.
What's it called?
Phoenix, yeah, Phoenix Rising, something like that. Yeah, it's a Phoenix for sure. Okay. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, sort of like in the history of Albuquerque, when the pandemic hit, and obviously everybody was sent home, but when our artists were sent home, people couldn't buy art in the galleries, our performers went home, theaters were shuttered. We didn't have audiences for things. I am so proud that our division stepped up and our arts board and our urban enhancement trust fund board stepped up. We, in a matter of 8 months, were able to put out almost $1 million worth of funding for artists and artisans in our community that were shuttered and locked at home and had no way of making income. But we bought a lot of amazing art. It took us quite a while after we did the call for art and we selected it. We bought 80 new works of art, primarily that are all in the convention center. There's a few of them in City Hall, but this is one of the very large pieces that we bought, and it was a great opportunity because artists, you know, they were not having any way to get it out and living around it in their studios, and when they were, you know, in solitude, a lot of them were making bigger art than they've ever made, and then all of a sudden now they got all this art. So it ended up being a really good opportunity for us to you know, really support our local artists. Okay, next slide. So one of the projects that's coming forward that I am super excited about is the rail trail project. And you've probably been reading about it some in the news and seen some of the news releases and some of the great news. And we got cobbled a lot of funds together, about $35 million to really kick off this first phase. And so we've been right there at the beginning of this the whole time. We received a National Endowment for the Arts grant to bring in artists to do a creative placemaking and temporary public art experiments about what kind of public art can go along the rail trail. So this is our first day of having permission to literally walk along the railroad tracks with our 10 time travel artists. We did a call for artists, and their job was to be time travelers and to go back in time, but also forward into time with imagining what cultures might have been like, what this pathway might have been like way back in the past, what is in the more recent past, you know, with the trains, and what could it be going into the future. And so our next slide, the time travel artists did a phenomenal job of engaging with people at activities such as the farmers market, and we had a couple of open houses, and we're going to go to the next slide. And just got a lot of feedback from people about what they imagined like public art could be on the rail trail. And we, for the first time ever, had 30 pages worth of ideas and information and aesthetic treatments and themes and visualizations integrated into, we'll go to the next slide, integrated into the actual planning document for a major piece of civic infrastructure in our city. So to have the rail trail, the overall rail trail planned, which is mostly, you can see the railroad tracks, and the darker yellow line is basically the path that people would take to go from the rail yards all the way to Lomas. And now the city has grants to do the planning and design for going from Lomas all the way around on what they call the Sawmill Spur, where the train track will come all the way around and basically end right out here to the north of us in front of the Sawmill Market area. And so we're looking at being able to put public art through that entire corridor. And I'm just so pleased that our administration, the mayor, and everybody in the Public Works Department and the Planning Department and the Parks Department have embraced public art so much that they want to have it on that kind of trail. Okay. So another piece that's coming, and this is a unique example of sometimes what happens with the public art program. And I'll show a couple examples of that, but and it's also what happened with the Madonna of the Trail and the Brayden Memorial. That the artwork was there and the public art program adopted it. We now take care of it. It's part of our purview to make sure that they stay maintained and cared for. This is Upton Gray Shoes Ephelbach. He is a Native American artist who actually lives here in the Old Town area. And he was selected for a sculpture competition that's going to be completely funded. The sculpture is going to be completely funded by the Albuquerque Community Foundation as part of their 40th anniversary celebration. And the maquette he's showing here is the type of sculpture that's going to go in the roundabout at 12th and Manal. So if you go to the next slide, This is Gray Shoe's depiction of how the sculpture will be sited in that roundabout. So that roundabout, you know, everybody's still getting used to it. It's a roundabout with like 1.5 lanes in some places and 1 lane in other places. And, you know, there's been a few close nicks on the stone in the center. But the public art program agreed to adopt the sculpture once it got installed in the community foundation, pays the artist for it. And I also just want to recognize that Joe Sabatini's been serving on the committee for that project. So he knows all the details. Of course, Joe's going to write the history of how this whole thing came together, I'm sure. But we're very excited, and it's, you know, it's a $50,000 sculpture. And it's going to have uplighting, and it's going to be really beautiful. It's right there, just north of the Indian Agricultural Center.
Where is it? What stage is it at now?
The artist is in the fabrication stage, and we're in the very, very close to approving more conduit and electrical stage, so that we can have uplighting in the middle of the roundabout to uplight.
What's the material?
Steel. It's going to be steel fabrication. With cutouts, so there'll be some uplighting through the center of it, and the designs will be able to see them at night. Okay, next slide. So one of the things that's also in this legislation that City Council just introduced last week is the ability for us to do more temporary public art. Right now, 1% of our funds are used primarily for public artwork that is permanent, or it has to be last at least the life of the bond that funded it. So most general obligation bond funds are paid back by the city anywhere between 10, 15, 20, 25 years. So anything we buy needs to last that long. But we've introduced some legislation to allow us to use a small percentage of that for more temporary type of public art, where the artwork might go away after a while, but the documentation of it, which could be video, which could be large scale images or photographs, would become the actual artwork that goes into the collection. Because as we are starting to see that there's a, you know, obviously the more we have, which right now we have 1,400 works of art in our public art collection. The more we have, the more we have to take care of. But if we can do public art on kind of like an event scale, where it's there for the weekend, or it's there for maybe 3 months during the summertime or something like that, then it's a great art experience. It's a great opportunity. We get fabulous pictures because, as we saw earlier, people like to take pictures of public art. But then it goes away. We don't have to take care of it. So we're kind of trying to do a two-pronged approach with being able to conserve and take care of public art with the funds that, you know, that we can get. And temporary public art will help mitigate long-term costs, but we definitely want to take care of all the ones we've already committed to and some of these big ones going forward. So an increase in the percentage will help that. This is a historic Route 66 sign. It used to be, well, the building that used to be at the site was the El Serape restaurant in Nob Hill. And so we had formed this partnership with a group called the Friends of Orphan Signs that takes these orphaned signs, because they don't have a building to advertise anymore, any activity, and turn them into public art. And so this is our first sort of like foray. We dipped our little beak into the world of temporary public art. And this lasted about 9 years. So we got really close to the bond coverage. But we still own the sign, and we still, the artwork design in the center is probably going to be redone, but we're going to relocate this to the new Route 66 Visitor Center way up on the far west side in time for the 100th anniversary. So we're going to, we have this ability to, you know, sort of recycle these sign structures and turn them into public art. Okay, next slide. And here's another example of temporary public art. This is just finished last week. A couple years ago, we did this project called the Public Pianos Project. If anybody's ever been to Denver, you might have seen the public outdoor pianos on the 16th Street Mall, and people can just walk up and, you know, play the piano. Well, we tried that. We tried putting one out on Civic Plaza, and it got just yeah, it got violated extremely bad over the first night. It was so heartbreaking. So we got another piano donated to us. And we have the same artist come back. But now this piano that is done by Thomas Bowers, it's going to stay inside City Hall, where we can keep a little better control over like what people do with it. But we have one inside the convention center, and I neglected to throw a picture in, but it's called the Piñata piano, and it's all covered in felt. And it is, people come up and play it in the lobby of the convention center, and it just fills the whole west foyer with beautiful, beautiful music. Even when the kids are pounding on it, it's just such a stark contrast to, hear live piano music in a big, convention center. So it's really great. We love our pianos. We hope to be doing a lot more.
Where's this one going?
This one will probably stay inside City Hall in the first floor area, where we're going to be moving back into and have a first floor gallery. Okay. So this is kind of a difficult picture to see what it is, but this is a classic Albuquerque detention basin, right? Everybody lives by one of those somewhere, right, in Albuquerque, because this is how we handle our crazy monsoon rains runoff. But the reason why I wanted to show this is because this is at Lomas and Arno, between Broadway and Arno, and then 1 street just north of Lomas. And if you go to the next slide, what I love about this is that public art is not just something that we do, the public art program. Everybody is interested in public art. I think we've done such a successful job of integrating public art that now landscape architects and engineers and designers are incorporating public art. And so this is the retaining wall on the east side of that big detention basin that I just showed you. But these are very unique, one-of-a-kind cast walls that show the history of Albuquerque, just in concrete relief. And I would encourage you to go see it and explore this design and see all of the things that you can see in there about Albuquerque's history that are just depicted in a really simple line drawing that can be cast in concrete as an embossment. And obviously, you can see right here is the train, the locomotive that used to be Coronado Park that is now running. And you can kind of see, a little bit of the grid and the river, but I'm not going to tell you about anything else that's in there. I'm going to encourage you to go see it because it's a really, really just beautiful done piece of civic infrastructure that we have nothing to do with. So it just means that there's, people out there that are thinking that art in our built environment is really important. And so we're very excited to see more of this. Okay, next slide. So I'm showing this one because this is a piece of, I guess you could call it public art. It's in a public space, but it's something that was designed, again, by somebody totally just working in the development area. This is way out by Cueva High School. And what it is a tribute to all of the more well-known artists from here in Albuquerque. So the spire in the center is actually kind of like a paintbrush. It's like a paintbrush, or it could be a quill, because there's some people that they have their plaques around here. But all of these plaques that you can see, these little areas right here, are actually handprints of some of Albuquerque's most famous artists. So Betty Sabo, Wilson Hurley, I'm drawing a blank on all the other ones, but it goes all the way around. And so here is an actual public artwork that wasn't done by the public art program, but was done by someone building this development that wanted to honor the artists in our community. So it is in a bit of disrepair, and Councilor Burkeman has asked the public art program to adopt it so that we can take care of it. And it really only makes sense because many of these artists are in the public art collection. It's designed as a sculpture. It really just needs a fresh stucco, layer of stucco all the way around it, and we'll make it look nice again. But these are the kinds of what we call cultural assets that are out there in our community that sometimes they get forgotten, they get neglected, nobody knows how they got there. And so who do they call? Public art. Yep, we'll try to take care of it for you. So next slide. So this is where the presentation gets really, really interesting. I have 2 pie charts. pretty simple. This is the formula that we use right now for how we fund and take care of public art. So what a lot of people don't know is that the 1% for public art is broken up into two parts. 20% of the 1% is used for conservation and maintenance and taking care of public art. 80% is actually for public art, for new art. So we've never really been 1% for art. We've been 1% for art and taking care of it, but we've never barely been 1% for art. If you go to the next slide. So what we're proposing is 1.5% for art. And by using this formula, 67% of 1.5% is actually 1 full percent of the general obligation bonds. And then we get to use the other 33% to take care of our artwork. It ups our budget for conservation and maintenance considerably. But by lopping off a little bit and saying we want to do temporary public art, we want to explore how people experience public art at events and activities, or maybe it's a sculpture. We would love to handle things a little more like the museum does on its grounds. It rotates artwork. Well, we would have the opportunity of working with artists and rotating their work, where we could pay them sort of like a rental fee, but then it goes away. So we can get more art in front of the public, but it doesn't become something that we're taking care of. So next slide. Okay. So these are the next ones we're expecting are probably gonna, we're gonna be encouraged to adopt. And it's so funny, I show both of these pictures because the picture on the left is my picture. And the picture on the right is from the Entertainment Weekly website. So no, they're not the same photograph. They obviously have better lighting crew and cameras than I did, but I was just doing some research, right? And because these came in basically totally under the radar. We heard something about it about 2.5 years ago. Somebody said, well, that sculpture, and I laid out the whole process. Anybody can offer to donate something to the public art program. It just have to go through the Albuquerque Arts Board. We do a little bit of an analysis and assessment, and where would we put it, and is it going to have any ongoing costs? So I shared all that, and then nothing. Didn't hear anything. And then about a week out, we heard that they were coming. And we're like, where are they going? So again, the good thing is we're not the only ones to do public art. Sometimes we wish we knew a little bit more, but it's okay. The more the merrier. So next slide. So of course it was a really big deal to have the two actors come and be part of the unveiling and the dedication. And there were about 200 or 300 people there. We've never had 200 or 300 people at a public art dedication. It's okay, it was a different kind of sensibility about what these sculptures are all about and what they meant. We know there's definitely people out there that don't think that this is the kind of thing that we should be doing. So next slide. But what I wanted to share with you is something that I thought was really, really interesting. So I took our 3 most controversial public artworks. I just did a really quick Google search using the same phrase, right? Southwest PA top, right? This is our first one, right? And it was the most controversial. So when you just Google it, you get 46,000 hits, right? So then you go to Chevy on a Stick, which again, I'm not supposed to say Chevy on a Stick, that's a violation, but that's what everybody knows it as. So Chevy on a Stick gets 1.9 million hits. The La Jornada, which was done in 2006, little over 500,000, 570,000. Breaking Bad Sculpture, 51.3 million hits in 24 days. That's how long it's been in existence. That's how much traction it is getting as public art in Albuquerque. So this is not a scientific research project. It's simple, but it just says a lot about what it is that we commemorate, how people respond to it in the moment. How are we going to be responding to these sculptures, historically down the road? My hope is that we actually get them out of the convention center. For those of you who don't know, our offices are right next. We're in the convention center. We have our own exterior door, but we can also go inside. And for the past, several weekends, every once in a while, if I have to stop in on the weekend or all during the week, mostly since they've been installed, the convention center's been closed because there hasn't been any conventions going on. And there are people all day long trying to open the door. They want to get in and see those sculptures. And 9 times out of 10, I'll watch them. They'll get in their car and they have out-of-state license plates. They came here to see those sculptures. And I'm like, what do we got to do about this? Anyway, you know, they're obviously worried that they could be vandalized. You know, I show pictures of little bronze girls getting vandalized, right? So, you know, that's something that can happen. But there's also ways to make sure that they don't get vandalized. And placement is really important, but giving public access to sculptures and to timely things, I think is really, really important. So I'm kind of on a mission to figure out how we're going to change that. And I think it'll probably change after a while. But let's go to the next slide. I'm just going to wrap up here. Just have a couple last little slides. But one of the things that I wanted to say is that I really, really appreciate organizations like yours and everything that people do in this city to help, you know, capture our history, to retell the stories, and to be involved in collecting so much information and making sure that it's, you know, for the most part accurate, you know, a little embellishing, you know, stories, the anecdotal information here and there is great. But this is something that just happened last week. A woman named Ruth Apodaca, I don't know if any of you know her, but she has been following the public art program and documenting public art for nearly 20 years. And she unfortunately is moving away. She's getting much older. But she called me up and said, I have all of these photographs, all these albums of public art. So she has donated to the public art program 13 albums of nothing but photographs of public art. And what's so amazing is that she has photographs of things that we don't even have photographs of in our collection because they were donated to us or something. We didn't know what they looked like in their original state. And so sure, there's, you know, some of my staff are like, oh my God, we have to like lug these things around. You know, well, no, we'll probably digitize them, but at the same time, that information is there. And so if you go to the next slide, one of the things that I was so excited that I came across in her photo album was pictures of the front of the El Madrid bar on First Street underneath the Cole overpass. What was it? Yeah, Cole or Lead. I think it might be Lead overpass. Of the murals that were done by Mr. Wolverton. I can't remember his first name right now. But right now, these have been graffitied and tagged, and all that's left, if you drive there to drive down First Street, is Elvis's face. I didn't know what the rest of the mural looked like. It had been so long since I'd seen it, but she has photographs of these amazing murals that were done by muralists, you know, that were never commissioned by the public art program, but now there's such a research interest of murals and the history of murals in Albuquerque because they say so much about who we are as a community or were at the time that I was just thrilled that she has 3 of those photo albums dedicated to just murals, and a lot of them we don't have pictures of. So next slide. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for letting me come and speak to you and show you all these crazy pictures. But for the information that you generate, that you collect, that you document, that you put together, you are welcome to come visit us. This is where we are right now in the Convention Center. That's our little private door right there. This is the banquet door for all the disgruntled Breaking Bad sculpture people. But you can come visit us, and we're interested in materials. If you have information, you know, this is really great. This is really helpful for me. I thought I knew a lot about all of our sculpture, but there's really great little tidbits of stories in here that I didn't even know about. And the thing that's so wonderful is that after all this time, we finally have, it's going to be advertised very soon, an education and outreach coordinator position just for the public art and urban enhancement with our division. So knowing that we're going to be able to have a person who's going to be able to really dig into these stories and come do a lot more of what I'm doing right now for groups like yours, for high school kids, for elementary kids, you know, you name it. We get asked to talk about this collection all the time. And I'm so excited that we'll have someone there that's going to be able to really dig out even more of these great little stories. So come visit us while we're still in the convention center. When we move, hopefully in November or December, we'll be in City Hall. You can come visit us there. And that's my presentation, so. Thank you. I'll start here.
So this is more of a comment, like you showed the Brayden sculptures, probably not the actual name of them, but you know, whatever they're calling it. And, you know, I think like we kind of have feelings about like, oh, you know, these are getting so much more attention, but I mean, how great is it that people who maybe otherwise wouldn't have been interested in bronze sculptures and public art are so excited about these?
Exactly. That's where we're at. And that's where I say that we're not the only ones. Like, we're not the art police. We're one way of doing art in this city, right? And the more the merrier. So let's see, was it?
Why is it called 1% for art? 1% of what?
Oh, 1% of the general obligation bonds. So every 2 years, the city puts forward on the ballot for all the citizens to vote on general obligation bonds, which pay for our roads, our swimming pools, our libraries. And so the whole budget gets put together for all of the projects, and then 1% is added to that overall budget.
And the projects are for a particular project? The art is for a particular project?
So public art, we have one of the most flexible policies in the United States for public art. We have to spend our funds by bond purpose. So if the Parks and Recreation bond purpose is 30 million, and they're going to have 2 new swimming pools and park upgrades, we can put all of that money into one swimming pool, if we want, the 1% park money, and make a really great project just at one swimming pool because we're using it by bond purpose. So my analogy is we don't put public art at every pothole that we fix. We put public art at one really big location like the Tricentennial Towers.
On the, going north on Coors, above my time, there's what my husband and I call the blue porcupine. What is that?
So that is, we call it the porcupine too. It's called Flyway, and it is a sculpture that's made out of the recycled jetty jacks in the Bosque. And the artist was always fascinated as a kid, looking out the door, looking out the window as you're driving past and watching everything go like this, right? And he also had seen formations of birds fly that kind of do that same moray effect. And so he wanted to use the material of the Bosque, which is, they talk about invasive species. Well, this was invasive infrastructure. So he wanted to reuse those. Sorry, Roland. He wanted to use those pieces of recycled jetty jacks, put them in some sort of an array format. And so he just painted the tops of them blue, and it's an artistic expression, but it was commissioned to really be a marker for the entrance into the Open Space Visitor Center. And so it definitely gets a lot of attention, but it's really beautiful to walk through. It's great for photographing, getting angles of light, and yeah, photographing public art is so important. You want it to look good. Yes, right here.
You mentioned a piece that was going to go in the roundabout at 12th and Mall. Isn't there already a sculpture there at 12th and Mall?
There's a roundabout with a sculpture at Manal and Indian School.
Oh,
It's the next roundabout.
That
Yeah.
place.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I'd like to put in a plug, if I may, since you briefly mentioned the airport art. The old 1939 terminal building, WPA constructed, is still there. It's open to the public. A lot of you probably already know this. In case you don't, there's still a lot of the original art on display in there. You can go in there and view it.
Yeah, the pop chalets are still something.
So, yeah, I think the 2 I showed are still in the original.
They're in the new terminal.
Okay.
The old terminal still has some.
The other ones, yeah, the big mural. Yeah.
I kind of got this idea from your presentation there about the donation of the books with all the photos of the murals. Maybe it would be a good idea for your department to document. There's wonderful murals all over Albuquerque right now, and they're going to be lost to posterity someday. I mean, the old Albuquerque Ice Company building on 2nd Street, and there's a building at Lead and Broadway with a bunch of Chicano history on it.
Right.
The whole building is covered.
Isn't it
I
a
would like to
website?
see
There
that?
is, I'm so glad you mentioned that because there is a website that was built by a private citizen, a small business owner. And she is donating the website to us. It's called Muros, MUROSABQ.com. And it's a website where artists are encouraged to upload their own pictures and put their name on it and the location, and it has a mapping function. And we're in negotiations right now with her about how to bring it over, how to bring it over into the city's website. And it's going to be one of the projects that our new education outreach coordinator is going to manage. So it actually, we do have a lot of documentation of today's contemporary
Yeah,
murals.
in that same line, since you mentioned Breaking Bad, the idea popped into my mind. A lot of movies and TV shows have been made here in Albuquerque.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you could get permission to get copies of them, the portions that do show Albuquerque. Like, remember Wild Hogs, anybody? There are a lot of scenes in Albuquerque and in Maverick. And it would be interesting to have those, just because it shows what movie makers were doing with Albuquerque, but also because at some point in the future, it will show what Albuquerque looked like back then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that the Albuquerque Film Office, I think on their webpage has a list of every film that was ever made and filmed in Albuquerque. And one of the ones I love the best to show, like what you said about how it was made. Has anybody seen The Man Who Fell to Earth? With David Bowie? Okay, that whole movie was filmed here. And there is a scene at the very, very end where he's walking across Civic Plaza. Before Civic Plaza was renovated and before the second half of City Hall was built. And he's walking across and you can see the old City Hall building. You can see the old sort of brutalist architecture of the convention center in the front. So that whole movie, I love that movie because you can see Albuquerque everywhere, just like when you're watching Breaking Bad. So yes, there's people out there doing exactly that kind of archiving that you're talking about. Roland?
You might mention that there's a Martinez sculpture right outside the door here in the museum.
Oh, you mean the Jimenez?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that's not the
Luis
same
Jimenez.
person.
Yeah. We share a lot of artists with the museum, but we have a very different mission. We put our art out there and it gets bird poop and everything. The museum does other things. I mean, they put theirs in storage in the vaults, right? So it's great because those artists are going to have works that are going to last forever, but we have the great job of making sure that people have access to it anytime they want. So yeah, second.
I know of wonderful public art that doesn't belong to the city of Albuquerque, belongs to the federal government. In the Fifth and Gold Federal Building, because I used to work in that building, and beautiful murals on the first floor. Lauren Mosley, is that who the artist was? The WTA project. The building dates to like 1930.
Right.
And they had a flood in the building about 3 or 4 weeks ago. There was a pipe that broke on the 10th floor, but it didn't damage those.
Oh, good.
Because I was in the building recently and stuff out.
Right. Yeah, well, we have a little bit of a collection. We don't put it on our webpage because it's not our public art, but we do have a little bit of a collection, archival collection of information about, what's in other buildings, the federal building. Of course, you all know Bernalillo County has a very robust public art program as well. Their new building has tons of public art in it, and they're putting public art all throughout the whole region. So
What happened to the Harrison Schmidt sculpture?
the astronaut.
Yeah.
It was going to go at the
the airport.
Sunport. I don't know exactly, other than it was all went through the arts board. The arts board said, yes, we would adopt it, we would take it in. And then at the last minute, there was something about the placement of it that the donors and the airport couldn't agree on. And they basically said, okay, fine, we're gonna donate it to someplace in Houston. Yeah, I mean, it was such a tragedy. I was heartbroken because I love outer space and I was really hoping for something like that here. So, okay. Joe?
Want to remember Millie Santianis in 3 of these pieces here. The Ornata sculpture, because she's one of the, she's represented there.
Right.
she's responsible for the Tricentennial Towers,
Right.
which she had hoped would be 300 feet high as opposed to
Right, one for each year.
But I'm remembering the director of the public library was the head of cultural services during the 1980s, Alan Clark. And so we in the library staff got occasional updates about Millie, as an Old Town merchant, organized the resistance and to this disrespectful, anyway, you can tell that story better. than
Well,
I
there are
can probably.
definitely artwork characters, but then there's citizen characters that have made Albuquerque Public Art what it is, that's for sure. Yeah.
Oh, the first slide was kind of joking about what's the worst thing about public art is the public. But it is a real concern as you're talking about putting things out there and just so like an honesty or a trust factor.
Right.
What happens here. What does the city of Albuquerque, do they look at other cities that maybe face similar concerns and try to learn from how can you better protect, or is it just simply an education, respect factor, education to community better about the importance of these things, maybe not to miss them?
Yeah, well, we're definitely part of a national network of public art administrators. The Americans for the Arts has a very specific group of public art administrators and public artists, and we share information all the time. And I would say that by and large, Albuquerqueans respect our public art. I mean, there's a couple of murals that we put in places, it was already tagging zones, and they've required a lot of maintenance. But for the most part, it's like somebody bored sitting, with a Sharpie and they put their little initials or whatever. Obviously with the events of 2020, we had some more very deliberate vandalism on artwork, making very social political statements, throwing red paint on the Oñate. Those are just acts of, people expressing themselves. And we expect those things to happen, but there's some that we thought were going to be vandalizing worse, they weren't. And so